Okay, test. Think everything's set up. Controller seems to be working. That's definitely a plus. The stream health seems to be okay. Okay, so I think we're going to get started in just a moment here. Oh, hello to everyone. Hope everybody is doing well. Hope your week is going well. Thank you to everybody who stopped by the previous stream and checked out the VOD as well. Really appreciate the enthusiasm and the discussion and everything. It was really great getting a chance to connect with some of y'all and just chat about the game. For those who might have just stumbled across this or who are just tuning in this evening, I'll give a little introduction. My name is John. I do game development for a living, and I love playing games as well. And I find Elden Ring to be one of the best games out there, period. Certainly it has its flaws, it's got some quirks and all that, a little rough around the edges in places, but it is a masterclass in a lot of aspects of game design that I find really compelling and impressive. Like many of the other like Souls and Souls series games, it does a really, really great job of telling you things, teaching you things, and inviting you to do things without forcing you to do them and without being overly strict or heavy-handed. It doesn't rely too strictly on the traditional forms of tutorializing in video games, which can be a bit obnoxious and can be a bit immersion breaking, and it just succeeds at pulling you into this lovingly crafted world and I don't know, hooking you in a way that always has felt very organic and natural. So in addition to just being like really fucking fun and enjoyable from the perspective of a consumer or a game player in general, I think it's worth studying for anybody who's interested in game design, in games as art, as games as like a medium of storytelling and all that stuff. Basically, it's really fucking pretty, it's really fucking smart, and it's fun to talk about. So this playthrough will not be any like crazy raucous, you know, like beating one instance of Melania with my feet and another with a Guitar Hero controller, or anything like that. It'll be pretty slow paced. We're going to be taking our time to stop and smell the roses and basically just look for opportunities to evaluate how the developers, the challenges that the developers faced and how they approach those, as at least to my interpretation as somebody who also tries to make games. So that being said, last time we left off with a fight, I believe, against the wandering knight on the bridge here, or rather I think they're called Kaiden sellswords, and talked a little bit about the way that they were telegraphing their attacks. I personally really enjoyed the fact that these knights have an attack that can, what's the term for it? Basically force you into a stagger. And probably for most players at this point in the game, this will be the first encounter that they have with that particular type of attack. I think it's very well telegraphed. It's pretty much, what's the term for it? It's fair and even-handed, while also representing a significant threat if you're not paying attention. So I guess you could say it's well-balanced, is probably the easiest way to put it, simplest way to put it. Now, before I go back to the site of grace and heal and start the next part of the adventure here, I do want to try something. I'm probably going to get ambushed by the knight, actually. So let's go back to the map and heal up real quick. We can actually talk a little bit about the fast travel system and the map and all that, and see how you guys feel about it. I know when they introduced fast travel as like a default thing back in Dark Souls 2, it was a bit controversial, and there is an argument to be made that it, well, it does fundamentally, like, factually change the nature of the way that you interact with the game world. I think it's sort of necessary in a game like this. It's hard to imagine a broad, wide-sweeping world like this without some sort of a fast travel system, although you could argue that games like Hollow Knight have a system that is a little bit more organic and natural feeling as well. With the, if you've not played Hollow Knight, first of all, highly recommend it. Probably one of the best indie Metroidvanias, up here making new words, indie Metroidvanias out there, period. Hollow Knight, ironically, was a game that, for me, was very similar to Dark Souls in that I absolutely hated Dark Souls the first time I played it. I actually played Demon Souls first, and I hated that too. And I was one of those people who thought that anybody who enjoy those games must be some sort of a weird masochist or whatever. Like, I just didn't get it at all. And then I came back to it later and found it to be, you know, one of my all-time favorites. And similar thing happened with Hollow Knight. Like, I played it through the first time. I wasn't particularly impressed by it, and I was kind of worried as to why, or kind of confused as to why there was so much hype around it. And then I started playing other Metroidvanias, and I realized that every time I had a problem with another Metroidvania, I would come back and think, oh shit, they solved that problem really well in Hollow Knight. So for example, I think I played, was it Ender Lilies? That I actually really liked that game, but there were a couple of quirks with the movement system that I was like, oh, if only they had just made this adjustment. Oh wait, Hollow Knight did that. And then there was a couple other, maybe it was, not Momodora, but a couple others that came out around that time that I also kind of felt the same way about. I kept coming back to Hollow Knight as being like the exemplar. So even though it might not be my favorite game of all time or whatever, it still feels to me like they succeeded in so many ways at solving so many problems. And it only fully sunk in later on once I had a chance to kind of reflect on it. So I'm going to engage in combat with this knight here. I am not going to win, but I think examining the failure will be an interesting opportunity to talk about. So let's just see how far I get. What is the game trying to teach us, or what opportunity is it trying to present us with this kind of encounter? So first of all, the implementation of that jump is a little bit wonky. And I think it's sort of to be expected because, or not to be expected, but it's one of those problems that's really difficult to solve. When you have a character like this that's not only, how can I phrase this? So in previous Souls games, when they tried to have like a mounted character, they would oftentimes fuse the character with the mount, so to speak. So all of this, like the knight and the horse, I'm dead. The knight and the horse would all be one character model, essentially, with the same animation rig and everything. Here, they actually wanted the two to detach, and that's an entirely like separate layer of challenge that goes into the implementation. Right? Obviously, makes it a whole lot harder. I think they largely succeeded, but you know there is still some jankiness with the long distance tracking. The benefit, though, from a gameplay standpoint, is of course that it gives you plenty of time to see the attack coming and to respond to it. What I'm finding when engaging with this enemy, though, is that both my character and the enemy have like high commitment attacks, and as a result, like it's, well, I was gonna say that that's something maybe to be critical of, but it kind of makes it feel like a joust, right? First of all, I'm probably quote-unquote supposed to be playing this on my own horse, but the fact that we're each like waiting for opportunities to strike with these high commitment attacks are like, meaning like risky attacks that we don't it would take a minute to recover from, means that it kind of feels like a joust. We're like backing up, we're taking our time, we're waiting for an opportunity to strike, and then going in. I think the fact that this enemy, like part of its AI, is motivating it to like go back and come in for these long lunges is a part of that as well. And of course, I think part of the reason that I died there was because I was not looking for an opportunity to, how can I say, I was trying to meet the boss on equal terms, so to speak, meaning that like, okay, this is an enemy that takes its time, that backs up, and then does these big wide sweeping lunging attacks. I'm going to try to do that myself, and I just happened to lose, partially due to a lack of skill, I suppose, but also just due to the fact that I was giving myself no real advantage in that situation. And it was coming down to more of a numbers game than anything else, I think, right? Like, I was going to hit hard enough or I wasn't. I was going to have enough stamina to block with my shield or I wasn't. That being said, I feel like that enemy is still pretty fair. Obviously, my performance against it wasn't great, but if we were to take the time and try to learn its mechanics, it doesn't have an incredibly complex moveset, and the attacks that it performs are very well telegraphed, so I think we have plenty of opportunity to respond to it. Now, interesting thing about that boss, you might have noticed the name was like Knight's Cavalry or something to that effect, and the Knight's Cavalry only appear, as the name would suggest, at night, which means that, I think I mentioned this before, but in the same way that like there are certain Pokemon in the Pokemon games that only appear at night. I feel like incentivized to play at night in order to not miss out on those on those things. That was great. But I don't like conversely feel necessarily incentivized to play during the day, right? Like the daytime is the default, and then you switch it to night to look for bonuses. I don't know that, apart from the cosmetics associated with like switching the time of day or whatnot, it feels like maybe there could have been more of an opportunity to explore different things happening at different times of the day. I know that one thing that did happen when we were back in the little camp over there last time is that torches come on at night, and I think enemy patrols change and enemy perception distances change. So you're also able to stealth better. But given that, you know, a good chunk of the game takes place in interiors, and that stealth is definitely an option, but is not something that's like consistently incentivized either. I don't know. It feels like there's more diversity, there's more options to be gleaned from taking a more aggressive approach a lot of the time. Not that the opportunities aren't there, like we went over that last time we went through that little encampment. But I guess, yeah, it's weird that there seems to be this binary, like you either get a bonus from playing at a certain time of day or you don't. And there could have been more there, but just kind of rambling, I guess. Oh, hey, H&H Debates, how you doing? Thanks for stopping by. How's your week been? Yeah, I am. I've been making games for a little while now. And I find that like the more I try to work on games, and the more I like realize the nature of things, makes me just appreciate it, not just as like a piece of entertainment, but also just as I'm like, oh shit, you guys really solved that problem and you did a really great job. You know, there's a layer of respect, I think, that I've been able to cultivate over the years for just the ways that people are approaching handling this stuff and building these worlds. H&H Debate says, I feel like the incentivization for playing in daytime is that at night there are more minor random enemies, but the trade-off is not proportionate. Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. Don't the bats like spawn more frequently and have like more active patrols and stuff like that as well? Little observation here, I do like the fact that they have not just like patrolling enemies, but it also seems like the enemies are arranged in like a logical like strike force. You got 2 spearmen, a swordsman, and a crossbow wielder, what the proper term for that is. Just crossbowman, I guess. Ow. So yeah, like when I first saw this little troop over here, I was pretty casual about it. Thought I could handle them because they're just like low-level mobs, but the fact that they kind of wound up splitting up and fulfilling different roles, I think is pretty cool. Seems like a basic element of game design, but I mean, like, granted, this is unfair to Skyrim. Skyrim's over 10 years old now, right? But a lot of times just wandering around in games like that, you'll just sort of bump into enemies at random, and there won't necessarily be like an encounter associated with them, or a squad manager associated with them. So they're just kind of there. But even like going back to the swordsman, you know, it kind of makes sense that the swordsman would be found at night and at this particular place in the road and all that. It all feels pretty deliberately constructed. That was one of the first like revelations, if you want to be a little pretentious about it, that kind of helped me fall in love with the first Dark Souls game, is that once you start to realize that every single enemy is placed deliberately, like for a reason. And here's a little pile of shit. I wonder where these come from. I don't know what the lore is supposed to be, but oh, that's right, I do actually. I think that's hinting that there's bears in the vicinity, right? The giant rune bears. But anyway, that reminds me, I just saw that there was a challenge mode playthrough that somebody had done of all of the Souls games that have dung pies or like poop related items, playing through those games using nothing but the poop related items. So the fact that the game even allows for something like that to happen is pretty cool. Not to mention that they do actually weave some lore into it. There's a I'm sure it's a joke. I'm sure it's like a little chuckle on the player's behalf, but there's an item in Dark Souls 3 that you can get, which is like a hand clutching like some dung, and it says, Perhaps the hand clutched the dung because it wanted to savor the sweet pungent scent one last time, to enjoy the redolence of remembrance before slipping away. Or maybe not. It just kind of feels like they put it there because they knew somebody would be like, what's the deepest lore associated with this pile of shit? And, and that person was me. So thank you, Miyazaki, for writing that item description specifically for me. But yeah, I wanted to take a moment here and also his horn is attached to his head. Kind of remark on, I think we mentioned the placement of this guy over there in such a prominent position makes sense from like an encounter design standpoint, but also makes sense in terms of like he's got a bright shiny object, he's luring you up here, and from here you can get a better sense of the world and kind of plan your next move. Now, there is a very logical sense of progression visually up to the castle. I think most people are going to see giant, awesome castle with spires and mountains and stuff like that and be drawn to that naturally. The fact that it is like guarded and reinforced is being signaled by that intermediary gate there, and it kind of like mimics the progression of like, okay, well, here is your intro area where you can explore, and it's like, kind of take your time and feel things out. And then there's like the first gate, and you should kind of be aware that beyond that gate, there's probably going to be like a stepping up or a ramping up of a difficulty or like the number of enemies that you're facing. It's just a nice kind of soft way of providing like a boundary between the areas that I appreciate. I think somebody last time pointed out that there's a great amount of verticality here, and just by kind of surveying the land, you can get a sense of multiple pathways, not just in terms of like, oh, maybe I'll go here first or there first or whatever else, but also in terms of getting around that fort. Yes, it's in the middle, and yes, you can go right up the center, but there are several other implied routes with varying levels of directness. Some of them look like they might be more suited towards like coming back down, like this path over here. I don't know if I'd be able to jump up there necessarily. Maybe it's just a way down. But even though the world itself lacks some of the interconnectivity of the other games, there is a great, I think, effort put into providing a lot of opportunities for exploration and like non-linear. It's still sort of linear because you still have like a set objective that you're going to, but there are different ways to approach it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. H&H Debate says, Elden Ring's design through world building is amazing, but the layout of the land is definitely something I'm not a big fan of, at least for the most part. Oh, cool. Okay. So, yeah, tell me how you feel about it. Do you think it's like a little too convoluted, a little too barren? What's your take on it? I could definitely see looking at something like this and saying like, well, one thing is that we do have like big objects in the distance and all that, but in the foreground, it's a little bit samey, all the way from over here to over here. We do kind of have a relatively even tone of colors. There aren't any individual spots that are leaping out at us in the short field. I don't know that that's a like a flaw per se. Because again, this is the intro area, and it's kind of, I think, giving you an opportunity to acclimate. You also kind of want there to be some big open space where nothing's happening, so you can just mess around on your horse and just kind of, how can I say? I think there needs to be sort of pockets of openness in order for the world to feel big. So hopefully it doesn't feel too excessive in that regard. But I'm really just guessing. I'd be curious to hear what your specific thoughts are. I will say oh, hang on one second. Let me go check this guy out. Cool. So let me check chat real quick. H&H Debate says, I generally just think that with such a big endeavor as it is, there's a lot of wasted potential for interconnectivity. The teleporters were a guide for me, definitely. Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. I think that a lot of people since Dark Souls 1 have been craving those moments, those aha moments of kind of coming back to areas that you had previously visited and thinking that you were ways away in a completely different location, and then discovering, oh wait, like I just looped back around and I'm back here. Probably one of my favorite moments in Dark Souls 1 was just going down the elevator after getting to the area where you're about to go fight the gargoyles. And at that point, I was convinced I was like in a totally different part of the world. And then all of a sudden, I looped right back around, and I felt so like amazed that they had managed to make you feel so lost, and then like for so long. But then all of a sudden, they brought it all back, and it was like, oh, I've been here. This is okay. This is how this all fits together. Like, this is really brilliant. I think they succeeded doing that with the Shadow of the Erdtree map. Maybe there's an argument to be made that they didn't succeed as much here. But I will say that it still feels like there's quite a bit to do in terms of like variation. So I'm trying to understand, like, as a I have it on the wrong hotkey. As a player, like, I basically, while I was talking to you, I just kind of idly decided to run in a given direction. And now, granted, we have an enemy here that we could choose to interface with, or to challenge rather. But at the same time, without even being particularly goal directed, I just let myself go in a given direction to see like how we were being rewarded for our like random pathfinding, I guess. And we have a little incentive up here to go and collect these rune fragments. And not a big deal, but deciding to take a brief detour to come up this path gave us an opportunity to mess around with our horse a little bit, and then we can survey this part of the land. Now from over there, from where that crucifix was, we could kind of get a hint of what was down there, but really the emphasis was on framing the castle in the background and making that a primary objective. Now that we've come over here, with just a tiny bit of extra elevation, we can look down and we can see the lake beneath. And you might not have noticed just walking down here that is not just like a flat plain or an empty void that you can't go to, but it's a different biome almost. Not entirely. That would be something more like Caelid. But it's a different terrain type. And so with that might come different types of enemies, different encounters. And so I think it's cool that even like these little diversions seem to be woven in with like deliberate care. When Breath of the Wild came out, something that people said was that you could pick any spot on the map and spin around with your eyes closed and then stop moving the camera, and you would find something interesting to see or to do. So granted, this is one location. We could test this out elsewhere in the game, but I'm going to close my eyes, spin, 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 and stop. And okay, we have the Erdtree over there. We have a minor Erdtree to the right. I don't know if you can quite see it, but it looks... Oh, no, not Torrent. Sorry, buddy. Looks like there's also maybe a church over here as well. That spire over there could be something interesting. The game has also taught us that churches and structures like that are valuable because we found like the merchant in the first one that we went to before. I'm going to do it one more time the other direction and stop. Oh, it's the same place. Whatever. I'll just pretend that I stopped over here. So even this is not the best framing, right? But again, I have another Erdtree, minor Erdtree. I have this awesome looking statue over there, and I have another church in the distance. So we can get on our horse and ride around through that whole plains, that whole like field area for a good long time, and get a sense of the world being open and vast. But also, looking around, there's just a lot of shit to do. To me, it doesn't feel like shoved in there, like not to dig on Assassin's Creed, like some of the Assassin's Creed games are great, but it doesn't fall into what some people refer to as like the Ubisoft. No. Okay. the Ubisoft trapping of like climbing the tower, scanning, and then getting a shitload of things on your map, and then just checking them off, right? It all feels like literally, I don't even know where I'm going. I'm just gonna see what's over here. Okay, the game is guiding me over here. Here's a shiny thing. Gonna go talk to the shiny thing, and the shiny thing points me in that direction. How do I get there? Well, there's no fast travel. There's no immediate teleport or anything like that. But I just look to my left and I'm like, oh, I don't see a direct path, but I see half of the path there. So it's hinting that there may be a path down through the trees. The trees are kind of interesting. It adds a little bit of mystery, etc., etc. So I think most of the time, when you wind up somewhere, on the map, you'll have, if you just look around, the game will be giving you multiple opportunities, if not incentives, and suggestions of where to go. I mean, look, doesn't that look cool? Like, there's this little thing poking out the forest. The first time I saw that, I immediately wanted to go there. So I already have like multiple things I want to go check out. And I know it's like the whole Todd Howard thing of like, if you see the mountain, you can climb it or whatever. But here it really feels like always rewarding to do so. Anyway, HNH debates says, I will say for what Elden Ring loses in interconnectivity, it makes up for in direction, which is IMO a big flaw in DS1's design. They kind of trade off in a way. Yeah, I think that's a fair criticism for sure. The Assassin's Creed leaps of faith really wear off as a novelty when you realize they just kind of don't matter and are temporary dopamine boosts. Yeah, I mean, they're definitely like visually stunning and satisfying in that regard, but to me it's more about like what do they enable or unlock, or what can I say? Get it out of the way here. So there's nothing wrong with I've been playing the Halo games recently, which are really, really good. Not a big surprise, probably. But one of the things that I find myself wondering about is when it's appropriate to put a quest marker on the screen to indicate where to go, or like an objective marker. And ideally, you should never have to put a quest marker or an objective marker, Skyrim style, to teach your players what direction is the correct one to travel in. Like, you should just be able to figure that out through like intuitive level design. Sometimes though, you want to take certain risks with your level design, and you want like the forest level in Halo 4, for example, has all these sort of branches and tree boughs and leaves that are kind of interconnecting and draping over one another, and it makes for a very dense topography. And so it's like, makes sense to have the quest icon there as a backup, because you might just not be able to like ensure that your players are gonna be able to see where you're going. I mean, again, like ideally you should be able to do that through environment design, but it's really hard, and so having like another option can be a positive thing. I'm really not playing optimally here at all. Let me see, might be better for me to go for sword for a little while. Pretty sure this is the pyramid head guy, right? Yep. Chances of victory are low, but I'll go for it anyway. So I think that this particular encounter is a decent way of introducing you to a few concepts at once. Of course, I'm not doing a very good job of actually capitalizing on any learning here. But one of them being that this might be the first time that a new player has encountered a status effect in the form of poison, and then right afterwards you encounter this guy who gives you a status effect in the form of bleed. So it's a decent opportunity for you to have a low stakes opportunity to engage with both of those things with a nearby chance to recover. Now granted, if you're coming off of something like Dark Souls 1 with the toxic dart blowers in Blighttown or something like that, this probably feels way too forgiving. And there's an argument that some of that feeling of desperation and strandedness, for lack of a better word, has been lost a bit, of like, oh, it's underground, of course, of being essentially in over your head with no end in sight and basically just having to claw your way out. That's something that's not necessarily present as much here, although they do that thing where they teleport you into Caelid with one of the chests. Oh. Guess it's a little open for interpretation. H&H Debate says, I forget, was Halo 4 considered good? I remember people hating it. It was like 500 drops. So Halo 4 is interesting in that it was the first game, I believe, made by 343 Studios, so it was the first like non Bungie Halo after, the original team was called Bungie, and then they split with Microsoft for whatever reason, and they went on to make Destiny. And Halo 4 was the first game that they had made as their own studio, and unfortunately they decided to start the game off with a cutscene where a character was like, did you ever consider the fact that maybe the Master Chief is actually a real asshole and kind of sucks? I mean, there's more nuance to it than that, but like basically the vibe from the start was kind of weird, especially for a team that were like inheriting another legacy. And I think like another team's legacy in a property, like I think fans were expecting a certain kind of reverence, and they were immediately already pretty skeptical. And sorry, one sec. And then when they were greeted with that, there were other things that, like, moving away from the traditional locations was a little weird. Some people didn't like what they did with the character of Cortana, I guess. And so I think basically fans' opinions were soured from the get-go, and it didn't get a fair shake. But if you actually play it, I think it's very solid. I haven't finished it yet, but so far, I will say that the locations are awesome. The environment design is really good. The soundtrack is doing some crazy things in a good way. And probably the most satisfying, best sounding gun in any video game is the Promethean suppressor from Halo 4. I don't know who did the sound for that. I don't know how they did it, but that thing sounds fucking incredible. And I could literally just sit still in a room and fire that thing for hours and not get bored at all. It just sounds so good. There's a great sense of... I probably should have been leveling up. There's a real great sense of fluidity. You're incentivized to play pretty aggressively. That was the other thing. Like, so Halo never had sprint in it. I think sprint was introduced maybe as like an active ability in Halo 3 or Reach. And then after that, basically there were a lot of other big AAA shooters that were coming out at the time that were relying on sprint mechanics, like especially Call of Duty. And the fact that Halo did not jump on the bandwagon made a lot of people feel like that was part of Halo's identity. Like the choice that Bungie was making to stay away from sprint became synonymous with Halo retaining its own identity amidst all of these other games kind of jumping ship, or not jumping ship, but just sort of following a different trend, I think would be the best way to say it. And so then Halo 4 comes along and puts sprint in as a default mechanic, and it's like, okay, some people I think were very upset by the inclusion of that at all, didn't even bother evaluating whether or not it was good or useful in gameplay situations, and we're just like, yeah, whatever, we don't like it. So I'm not trying to strawman or be unfair to people who hate Halo 4. There could be a lot of really great reasons that I'm not aware of. I haven't finished the game, so I can't really comment on it. But I will say that I loved Reach, but coming right off of Reach and starting to play Halo 4 like right afterwards, I feel like 4 has like significantly, I don't know if I want to say better and be unfair to Reach, but it has really good movement, really good satisfying combat, really good weapons, the weapon variety, the multiple uses that every weapon has, the introduction of the new class and aesthetics of the Promethean weapons. It's all really, really good. I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10 just based on how I'm feeling so far. And I definitely think it has a right to exist, whereas some people, for whatever reason, see it as like the work of the Antichrist or something. Anyway, H&H Debate says, Sotaro Tojima, best known for his work on Konami's Castlevania, Circle of the Moon, and Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots. Oh yeah, served as Halo 4's audio director. Oh, nice. Okay, awesome. I need to look into that person's career more. I haven't played Circle of the Moon. I probably should. Some of these recording sessions took place in generally inhospitable environments such as underwater, in fire, and in ice through the use of specially designed microphones. That's insane. I love that. I gotta look into that. I feel like I saw a little mini documentary about the sound designers, like with a chemistry set or something. Like they had little low grade explosives, and they were putting like running electrical currents through Jello, and they were like setting off firecrackers in vats of goo or something. Like they were coming up with all kinds of crazy sounds. They also used something called an EMF, an electromagnetic field recorder, to record some of the like EMF waves that are that come off of any piece of electronic equipment. But specifically, they went through and they turned on old Xboxes and stuff, and recorded the EMF sounds that those were giving off at a distance, and then worked those into some of the weapon sounds for like the Promethean weapons, I think, which is a really cool idea. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about the progression for how we got in here as well. So we were wandering around the open world. We saw what looked like a shitty, relatively innocuous looking ruin. The ruin itself was guarded by this mysterious plant. Interesting, if you've come into this game from previous Souls games, that you may have seen, like especially in Dark Souls 3, I think was when it was first introduced, there are spells that that take the form of those rays of light coming crashing down to the ground. I think it was called like Gertrude's Prayer or something like that. I'm getting the name wrong, but basically there's a character in Dark Souls 3 that you would get this from, and it would spawn these radiant rays of light. And so right out of the gate, seeing that is pretty evocative, and I think does a great job of drawing attention. The design of this plant as well kind of conveys pretty effectively that the little sprouts are coming off of it, because we see some embedded into the the base of the plant. I like the fact that you can repost the plant. That's pretty cool, although I didn't manage to pull it off. It's also just pretty cool to see, like, you wouldn't necessarily think of a plant as being some sort of a powerful conductor of magic, but that is the case here, which is nice to see. And furthermore, you notice that I kind of approach this by trying to get around poison, like trying to avoid being poisoned, and then ultimately I did get poisoned, but I didn't immediately die or like get shunted out of the combat encounter. I realized pretty quickly, okay, this is a debuff, this is something that I need to be aware of, but also it's not going to punish me too harshly such that I can still actively manage it and keep fighting. Although I am going to die if I don't. Was there a grace there? Did I miss that? Must have not been paying attention. Oh yeah, what the hell? I thought there was. It was weird. But yeah. So not only does it give us an opportunity to engage with like the status effects in a pretty safe way, it also teaches us that status effects are not necessarily debilitating, and that you can fight through them if you have enough health, you have enough resources. It also gave us access to a couple of things. It gave us access to the immunizing cured meat, which we can use to boost immunity. And I think this is pretty well color-coded, with the sort of sickly, what's the term for it? Like pallid green look to it. It's kind of connected to the visuals of the poison that was coming off of the plant, so it helps us kind of intuitively identify, okay, this might be something related to poison, maybe I should go check it out and see if it can help me with poison. And then what was the other thing we got? We got the Miranda flower bloom over here, and I think this can also be used for crafting poison items. So this is also, they took the opportunity to sort of gently nudge us into crafting, like, hey, you can get poisoned and you can survive it, but also, like, there's the corpse of someone here that came here before you and was killed, presumably by that same poison, and he has an item on there that can help you with the poison. So, just saying, you don't have to actually go and play this way, but you can, and here's the resources, and, go figure the rest out yourself. Anyway, H&H Debate says, yeah, they said that too. Sound design is some of the craziest stuff ever, Lamau. It's such a pure creative medium. It's great, man. Yeah, it's really exceptional. It's really cool to see, like, how people will like talk about breaking down the weapon sounds as well. Like they'll record different versions of the like guns being shot from the first person perspective and then from a third person perspective. They'll record the guns from a lot of different positions and in a lot of different environments. And so when you fire one gun, you'll really be firing like 20 or 30 different recordings that have been 20 or 30 different positions that then have a bunch of different variations. So one gun might like have a couple of hundred sounds associated with it just for the firing. Make it so that, and they do this on Call of Duty too, in order to make it so that there's a lot of detail in and intricacy in layers, and everything sounds realistic too. So I'm gonna shut up for a second and talk to Selin, and then I want to talk about her little room here too.
Tarnished, are we? I wonder you should turn up here. I am Selin, a sorcerer, quite plainly. Why are you here? A yen for glintstone sorceries. I dare say your proclivities are far from ideal. Oh well, perhaps nurture will defy nature, with a bit of luck. But one must choose one's masters wisely. I was exiled from the Academy of Rea Lucaria as a reviled, apostate witch. Do you still wish to learn from me? Yes, I think that would be wise. We must choose our masters wisely. Well, have you made up your mind? Well, you are a piece of work. Very well. You are now my protege in glintstone sorcery.
I have some thoughts about this whole conversation, but...
Or cast kind words. Never. Anticipate grievances, young apprentice.
Cool. So, let's see. Oh, the miracle that drops on the beams of light were also used by the big fat knights in Lothric. Yeah, you're absolutely right. The, I forget if they're called the angelic knights specifically, but they're like the large sort of, chubby looking knights with the blue armor and the wings coming out of their backs, right? And they kind of like raise their hands up. Yeah, you encounter one of them in the first little area by the statue. And he's patrolling around. He's cutting down some of the, or it looks like he's been cutting down some of the Lothric knights. And they're like in conflict with one another. That's cool. That's a good point there. So, a couple of things I wanted to point out about Selin. Now, you might not, this is not like the end of the world if you don't notice this during your first playthrough. I certainly didn't. But there are, if you listen closely to her dialogue.
Young apprentice. First things first. You are a tadpole when it comes to magic. Infantile. Without the legs to walk. So, to become a sorcerer, first, you must face your ignorance. Now, shall we start learning?
So, a couple of things that I wanted to point out about her. Her dialogue, her accent is actually, if I'm correct in this, I believe it's Welsh. And it's not as thick as some of the other characters, but it is distinctly Welsh. And it's interesting to note that because Rani is another character who's associated with the Carians and all that, and she's Welsh as well. I believe the leader of the academy, why am I blanking on her name? Renala. I don't think she has a Welsh accent, though. I think she just has a northern British accent, but I could be wrong about that. Either way, they do this little trick in a few of the games of associating several characters with a given region, so to speak. Like, they'll give a few different characters a Scottish accent, and then you'll find out that they're all related or they're like from the same area. It makes sense. It's logical, right? But in this game, where geography is not as well defined, like different countries are not as explicitly mentioned as something like in Dark Souls 1, where you have like Astora or like Karim or whatever, it more hints at like the family connections between these different characters, the genealogies and stuff like that. So it's important to listen for, or if you pick up on it, I can give you a little bit of extra insight, I guess. So I like the environmental storytelling in this room. I think that most people, when they come into this area, they'll probably be very curious as to what exactly the hell is going on here. There's not necessarily all that much we can learn about her directly, but it's worth noting that she does like curl her hand up to the side there, and her hand actually looks a little smaller than I would expect, although I think that's probably like a bit of an optical illusion due to the size of the head. Her head being engorged and crowned with crystals, there could be some symbolism there. I'm not going to pretend to know exactly what it is, but you could be like, okay, maybe it's the weight of knowledge or the burden of like the crystals are coming out of the top of her head. So something about her gaze, as it were, like pointed down and resting on her hand like that. Is it evocative of maybe like how consumed she is by what she's thinking about, how it's kind of bursting out from her? Again, not reading too much into it, not assuming anything about the lore, but just coming in, we see this interesting juxtaposition of like a stately, simple robe, but then like these tattered, weird, like dirty cloth bandages, a very uncomfortable and heavy-looking quote-unquote crown, and then those cloth elements are also carried down to the lower legs as well, the sort of more tattered, dingy ones, and then the lower parts of her, I don't know what the term for it is, sash or whatever, that red element also looks like it's a bit frayed and dirty towards the end there. More dirty more so than frayed. But still, you could look at that and her posture and everything and start to glean a little bit about her character, despite the fact that we aren't going to figure out what any of that means until later. And then, I don't know, I'm not going to comment too much about all the individual props in here, but there's a good amount of environmental storytelling. You have a variety of different crystals that are arrayed in different locations. Some are scattered on the floor, though, and kind of I think that the fact that they're not displayed and they're not all shown in a position of reverence might hint as to some sort of frantic study. The books kind of heaped up in piles, not all of them are particularly well organized. There is storytelling going on here, and I think it's worth like taking a moment to kind of sink in. Like, look at that little box there with all those individual things that are sorted into their own little compartments. That's a cool detail. The sort of red that's actually probably pretty important. That red tinged stone over there might just be crystal, but later on she gives you a stone that's like blood red, and I'm not going to spoil anything if you haven't played it yet, but it is very important and kind of like shocking when it happens. So that could be hinting at that visually as well. I don't know. I like this space. It's small, it's compact, it's relatively simple, but there's a lot of detail in the props and in the placement of objects. And so, yeah, I think that's pretty cool. H&H Debate says, yup, Selene is played by Welsh actress Kezia Burrows. Also never noticed that. Wow. Yeah, thanks for verifying that for me. I should actually take the time and learn more about the cast. They did an amazing job. But yeah, I noticed that when like people were doing vocal clones. Oh, you know what it was, of all fucking things? People were doing like AI clones of Ronnie's voices, and they were all coming out with like a straight up British accent, and something sounded weird. And then I was watching Video Game Donkey had a video about what's it called, like Xenoblade Chronicles, and a character, I think her name is Mia, talked with that same accent. I'm not even going to try to imitate it, but it was basically, I really liked the way that she was pronouncing words and her accent. I hadn't really heard it before, and then I connected and it's like, oh, that sounds just like Ronnie. And so I asked around on Reddit, and somebody said, oh yeah, it's a Welsh accent. It's like, oh, okay, that makes sense now. I'm not sure why they decided to make that choice from a VO like casting directing standpoint, but it's cool. I think it gives her kind of a unique sound. You don't hear a whole lot of Welsh performances in games, so I know that Donald in Dark Souls 1, I think we talked about this last time, right, that he's is he Welsh or Cornish? And he has that one like Welsh phrase that he says like "I Shumai" when you come to see him for the first time, when you come to check in on him. And it's cool that they wove that in there. Miyazaki and his team do a pretty good job of incorporating idioms like that as well. Like when you fight Father Gascoigne in Bloodborne, the first thing he says to you is like "beasts all over the shop," and I guess that's a pretty common phrase. Like saying that something is all over the shop just means it's like all over the place, everywhere. But I hadn't, being like speaking American English, I hadn't heard that idiom before, and it just kind of felt natural. Learn something new, H&H Debate says all of the glintstone crowns are bestowed with minerals and crystals, but I assume it's more so like color symbolism. Hers is also only cracked one, maybe representing her corruption through knowledge. Yeah, that's a good point. I like that interpretation a lot. You're right. They have different colors and color color theory and the use of color in this game is exceptional. You might even argue that it's a bit on the nose because things are so strongly color coded at times that it's like, okay, we get it. But like we were talking about the ghost flame, right? How the ghost flame is always distinctly white in the catacombs and then blue, like dark black and blue, when coming off of the death birds and stuff like that. You've probably already seen it. I think a lot of people probably have, and if they haven't, they should because it's great. There's a video by a channel called Hawkshaw, Hawkshaw, called the color theory of Elden Ring or something like that. It's over an hour long if I remember correctly, and it basically is just talking about that. They do a very in-depth and like comprehensive analysis of the way that color is used to both storytell but also to inform. So yeah, highly recommend checking that out if you're interested in that sort of thing. I just love the way that they are able to, well, in the same way that like they're able to tell us something about the characters through their accents, putting like a visual accent of color on something also makes sense. It's not like the most advanced concept or whatever, but it's still very difficult to execute well and consistently. Let's take a minute and admire this guy over here. We got... I never actually stop to look at their faces very often. They don't look quite the same as the hollows in Dark Souls. They more just look a little bit faded. But still wearing aristocratic garb. You know, looks like... Well, maybe not. I don't know, the belt definitely seems like something that a commoner wouldn't wear with the jewels and such, and the hat as well. Maybe something that a minstrel would wear, something like that? I don't know. Shaw's still getting through those multiple hour-long lore videos. They're great. Yeah, don't they have one that came out recently that was like all of the Dark Souls lore, all of it, something like that, and it's like a 12-hour-long fucking marathon. Not an advanced concept, but it makes me appreciate it just more. Yeah, sometimes like just effective execution of simple things can just be very, very compelling and can make all the difference. Speaking of simple things, it'd be nice if I remember my hotkeys. Okay, there we go. I wanted to keep an eye out for... I have a crackpot theory that, like, how can I say? Most of the things in Dark Souls 1 are related to Titanite. And if you look at the stonework, you can sometimes see evidence of that, especially in Dark Souls 3. Not seeing it here, but one of the things that I love about... gold is that gold is a substance and a color, and the way that gold is presented in the game is something beautiful, something radiant, something enticing, but it's also like a motivating force. It's also an allure, right? It's also somewhat of an addiction, a compulsion. And once you going back to the shit lore from before, ironically, one of my favorite lore items in the game is the bear shit that's full of gold. I think it's just called like gold tinted excrement, and it's literally says something along the lines of, or maybe this is just what I'm remembering about it, but I remember picking that up and reading the description and being like, oh, so gold is in everything. It's in the air. Like, granted, those are leaves, but still, there are golden leaves in the air. There's gold in blood. There's gold in shit. There's gold that flies off of enemies when you defeat them. There's gold in plants, right? Just like in Bloodborne, how the plague, so to speak, like the influence of the outer gods was like inescapable. Like Erden, for example, like once he got into you and started influencing you, there's really nothing you can do. The moment you step foot in this place, it's just kind of like Subnautica, right? Like the moment that you kind of show up on the planet and you ingest the water, the bacteria or whatever are just in your system, and there's nothing you can do about it. And it's just a matter of like, well, I mean, spoilers, there might be something you can do about it, but not only does it get in your system, but it gets in everything. It just infects every inch and aspect of the entire world. And suddenly something that seems like, see, there's gold coming off of that, or maybe not, maybe that's a different effect, but there's gold woven into the seed itself. So this beautiful, alluring, enticing thing, then all of a sudden it becomes like a fucking waking nightmare. Because once you start to learn more about its influence and how it works and all that, it's like you feel like you're being hemmed in on all sides by this thing. You can't escape from it. Granted, if you go down into the underground, things change. Like, there are certain areas of the game that you can go to where the influence of gold is felt less, and not surprisingly, the narrative implications of that, like, you'll find out that when you go to the underground areas, that, like, the Nox places, the Nox are folks who diverged from the way of the herb tree, right? They kind of cast off its influence. So not only I guess it's kind of framed as like a punishment that they were cast down there, but in a sense it's kind of like, you know, I'm gonna punish you for not doing your homework and send you to your room. Oh cool, I have my video games in there, so that's fine. You know, it's like, well, we wanted to be away from the fucking tree anyway, so you sent us to a place where there's no more of that gold that's getting in everything. We're gonna do silver instead. And then conversely, if you go through the Nox areas, they are just as infected, quote unquote, with silver as the upper areas are with gold. So it's kind of traded one devil for another, I guess. H&H says, I have no idea, but holy, that sounds like something you need to jump on. Oh, sorry, I think I might have lost the plot a little bit as I was rambling for a while there. What was the thing that you needed to jump on? Just out of curiosity. That seems to relate to character themes as well. People like Marika, or I guess Mesmer, chasing royalty and status, being commanded by the crown without realizing it isn't as worth it as they think. Yeah, this was, have you played Dark Souls 2? I think that's a very prominent theme in Dark Souls 2 as well, of like how many kingdoms were kind of run by people who were obsessed with insert desire here, like insert legacy or dynasty or, you know, kingdom here. Some people like, tried to go and conquer, some people like fought for love or whatever else, but in the end they all kind of fell. Even the people who were trying to break into the very essence of the like core conceit of the world, they still failed. So kind of depressing when you think about it, but yeah, very compelling. And something that I think echoes in a lot of... Well, I probably can't make that jump. I'm gonna focus up for just 1 second. Oh, about the Hawkshaw video, but no worries. Okay, yeah. Cool. So, something cool about this encounter as well, like... This is one of the places where maybe we should come at night and see how it changes. But I could have gone up the main path and just dealt with everybody, and it would have been difficult but fair. But coming up here is interesting because we get a chance to approach the encounter from another angle, obviously. But we have a really interesting... I mean, it's subtle, it's simple, but this is the first time since the tutorial that I feel like I had to jump. And also, the jump is not something I can just make myself. So if I want to get up there, and now I'm pretty incentivized to get up there because that guy is there, I have to find another way around, and so this is my first little jumping tutorial with the horse. And it's pretty low stakes, it's pretty intuitive. This guy over here fires a projectile at you that is, it tracks you, so it's going to hit you if you don't do anything, but it's also relatively easy to avoid. It's not a big deal. It doesn't do a whole lot of damage, and there's a long cooldown between bursts. Did he just, like, outright give up? You can approach this guy and just check him out. Interesting to note that he also seems to mumble when he casts spells. Let me see if I can get close to him. Come on. And now, of course, you won't do it. Come on, buddy. I don't know if you could hear that. He was, like, whispering. There's subtle little things like that. I have no idea what he's saying, if it's even a coherent thing at all. It might be worth looking in the audio files to see. And then there's a nice little reward over here. Here's the sorcery. Yeah, so that's nice. You know, we see our first, I think that's our first sorcery enemy as well, unless you count the Miranda plant. And our first encounter with a sorcerer was also an encounter with somebody who had a ranged advantage on us, a ranged advantage that then we got an opportunity to subvert. There was a potential for failure there because we could have just tried to jump normally and fallen off. We have an opportunity to learn something new about our horse. Then we get a reward that is like thematically consistent with the challenge that we just faced. And now we're still in a pretty good position to go ahead and like continue exploring and engaging with the rest of the camp. We've already gotten something tangible and meaningful from it. I'll point out this thing over here as well, that like, this is me reaching a little bit. But you could potentially speculate that since, you know, we start to learn that glintstone sorcery is the manipulation or connection or whatever of magic associated with the stars, and here we see, you know, this, I forget what these things are called, not sundial, why am I blanking on it? But anyway, we see this thing. Does it say? I don't think so. And it's right nearby where we find our first sorcerer. I think, you know, kind of further solidifying the link between sorcery and glintstones, even if we don't know anything about it. And then if we look up here, just keeping in mind that those twinkling lights that we see in the stars right there aren't stars in the traditional like balls of gas sense. They are stones, like the stones that we saw in Selen's little laboratory. What we just captured may be to like an extension, like a piece of that life as well. So we're starting to get little hints of the overall like bigger picture. Ishine says, man, I really am happy FromSoft got so much more publicity from Elden Ring, but the elitist inside of me hates how tainted the Souls discourse has become. Those low-stakes, intuitive, instructional moments are so fun to me in context because they seem insignificant at the time they're shown, but it's the foundation for a game-changing mechanic. Yeah, absolutely. It's like learning addition before multiplication. Yeah. So I think in some sense, in some ways, they throw you into the deep end with like the, whatchamacallit, the big giant Erdtree Sentinel, like right outside the starting area. And, you know, I have mixed feelings about that encounter. I think it's probably a good one. I think it probably just kind of not only sets you up for, like gives you an incentive to come fight the strong thing later and gives you like a rival, I guess. But also, given, oh, you know what? Given that, the game throws a whole bunch of co-op tools at you early on, I think it's also trying to get you to just start thinking about co-op early, right? Like the summoning pool thing is like right there, like right at the end of the path that the knight is on, as I get pummeled by this guy. And so I think it's probably not just saying, hey, you come here and fight this thing later when you're stronger. I'm going to piss you off for now and give you something to think about. I think it's much more like that, but also remember you have friends that can help you out with this. And if you don't, like, go find some, that sort of thing. Can you talk a lot with people about like Bloodborne lore and then Dark Souls 2 lore? The first lore video, the first YouTube video I ever made, which unfortunately I don't have anymore, was a Dark Souls 2 lore video like I made 10 years ago about the bugs in Amana, like the bright bugs and like little things like that. So I used to be pretty active, but I haven't participated in a while. Are people still pretty hostile about, like, still pretty gatekeepy about, you know, you have to play the game a certain way or whatnot? That kind of what it's like. No summons and all that stuff. Get good. An astrolabe is a handheld astronomical instrument used to tell time, navigate, and make astronomical observations where you find... Oh, yeah, okay. That makes sense. Thank you for that. I totally just blanked on that. Oh, yeah, I never thought of the multiplayer thing. Wow, that's definitely something I would have never understood from my perspective as an older Souls player. Well, yeah, like, that's totally fair. Like, I think I mentioned before that I turned off online functionality on my first playthrough, mostly because like seeing like bright glowing messages that read like fort comma night on everything got pretty old pretty fast, which ironically like now the Fortnite Elden Ring is approaching in the form of Night Rain. But yeah, like I do really like the online connectivity thing. Um, but on the other hand, I by its very nature, it is going to be abused sometimes. And if you're just trying to like have fun, I don't like getting to a boss and then there's a cool evocative statue in the background that just has like a big Fortnite message on it. So H&H says, by the way, when you were going to ask me what I thought about the elitist stuff, your stream jumped. Oh yeah, sure, sorry about that. We've been having some stormy weather around here, and the internet connection has unfortunately been a little tenuous over the past couple weeks. Basically, I was just curious what if you wanted to share more about the state of the online discourse. I used to like do lore discussions on Reddit and stuff years ago for Dark Souls 2. I even made like a really janky Dark Souls 2 lore video like a decade ago or something now. So I would be not surprised if there was still a bit of the old like get good mentality going on. But yeah, I'd just be curious if anything has changed, if people are getting along. Also, really like this. This feels like a very nice, pleasant, intuitive, well-hidden little way of alerting enemies. Less annoying than the guys walking around with horns. Rewards players for paying attention. Ultimately not going to break your encounter or like ruin your day, so to speak. But something there to kind of prod you into, continuing to pay attention. But yeah, it is kind of interesting, right, when you compare it to previous Souls games, the way the multiplayer is set up. It's like very heavily incentivized. You get tools, or maybe that's not the right way to phrase it, but the game definitely seems like it's going out of its way to make sure you're fully equipped to do co-op very early on. Also, something that I find fascinating, I still don't know what the deal is or how I'm supposed to interpret this, but these stairs that form pathways for you to get down are actually tombstones. They're clusters of almost welded together tombstones, and they seem to have Hebrew writing on them. It might just be a script where the letters look like Hebrew. I'm not sure if it's actually meant to be literal Hebrew. But as a result, like, we have in addition to the ruins that have fallen from Faramazula, we also have just tombstones everywhere, like coming out of the ground, like coming out of mountainsides and stuff. And I wish I understood it better, but it is, I think, hinting at the idea that death just works very differently, or there's a history of death that is not that is extremely pervasive and almost like monumental, literally and figuratively. The way that they're sort of smashed together and so hyper compressed. Well, I just realized something. My interpretation of this is that they are tombstones. They kind of remind me of the ones in the Forbidden Woods in Bloodborne. They could, however, just be tablets with writing on them, like the mosaic tablets, right? They could be something like that. And this is more meant to just make us think that these were writings passed down from some ancient civilization. If they are tombstones, though, it does kind of fit with the theme of death taking so many different forms and having like basically entire cultures around it and stuff like that. So let's see. H&H says, I think I understand it to an extent. It's kind of like a natural reaction of just preservation of the fanboys base going get good and saying, hey, don't use summons. It's kind of like on the border on the quality of life for the commercial audience, and I guess good game design for the hardcore. Yeah, that's fair. And it's also super silly. Like, video games are meant to be fun. Let people have fun. If the devs add it and people like it, that's fine. If you don't like it, critique the game, not the players. Yeah, absolutely. So sorry, buddy. I don't know if you're familiar with a game called Ikaruga, or Ikaruga. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's a top-down shooter that was released for the GameCube, and it's part of one of those like shoot 'em up games that just has a lot of fast-paced energy. Or you might be more familiar with Toho, especially with all the amazing music that's come out of that series. I've always really wanted to play those games because I love the music, I love the aesthetics of it, I like the idea of the core gameplay conceit or whatever, but I literally physically cannot track what's happening. I've tried and I just cannot process it. My eyes glaze over, my brain goes numb, and I can't tell what the fuck is happening, and so I can't play the game. And if somebody came out with like a 0.5 speed multiplier for that game, I would love it, because all I want to do is just experience the art and the sounds and the controls and just enjoy it. I don't necessarily have to have the frenetic experience that everybody else is having, and I literally can't with the way my brain is. So, would it really be cheating? Would it really be unfair or bad or unethical or whatever for me to download a mod that lets me play the game at half speed if it lets me enjoy it? I don't think so. I think there is an argument that I'm cheating myself out of the real experience, but if the real experience is just unavailable to me, then having the next best thing I think can still be compelling. I don't see why that's a problem. And when it comes to Dark Souls, I think you may remember there was a guy, like a video game reviewer or something, who got to the last boss in Sekiro and couldn't beat it. So he tried for hours and hours, and then he wasn't having any fun, and so he downloaded a mod that reduced the speed to 0.9x. So not a huge modification, but enough to just give him that little bit of an edge that he could beat the game with it. And somebody in the comments section wrote this long diatribe that, like, something along the lines of, you cheated yourself, and you cheated, like, if you lead your life in this way, you're never going to feel like anything is earned. Like, you don't deserve the victory, and you saw the ending, but it means nothing to you. It's a hollow victory. Just some really, really, acerbic stuff. And I don't know. The difficulty in Souls games has always been a deliberate inclusion. I do think that difficulty cultivates, it's part of the storytelling. It does contribute to the overall experience of the game, and you should play it on its default difficulty if you can. But just doing that crazy amount of gatekeeping and saying, like, you're not allowed to play it in a different way if that's what's right for you. This video game, that's a game, because it means that you failed and you're a bad person. You don't deserve to participate. I am glad that Dark Souls doesn't give me, John, the opportunity to change the difficulty, because I want to be kind of forced to contend with it. But I wish it had one so that, like, my partner could play it, because I'm sure she would love to experience parts of the game without, like, dealing with Rolana's, like, 800 fucking hit unstoppable combos. Just be able to explore the world. Like, okay, I know I'm rambling here. This is the last thing I'll mention. Soma. Soma is one of my favorite games of all time. I absolutely adore that game. I think it's incredible. However, I refused to play that game at first, and only came back to it when they gave you the option to play in safe mode, where you wouldn't die or get reset the checkpoints or whatever if you got caught by an enemy. Because I just found the interactions with the enemies in that game to be completely frustrating and annoying, and I didn't want to get good. I didn't want to learn the whatever it was they were trying to tell me. Maybe that was stubborn and ignorant of me, I don't know. But I felt like it was just a distraction from the core gameplay and something that I didn't want to deal with, especially if I was playing it with my partner or somebody else who just wanted to focus on, like, the story and the philosophy of it. And it turns out the developers actually realized, hey, we don't really technically need the quote-unquote combat in order to tell our story. That's not the important thing here. So let's give players the option to play it this way with the combat mechanics, but let's also give them the option to play it in story mode. And they added that in post-release based on player feedback, and it was fucking great. I played it in story mode, and I fucking loved it. and I will gladly gush about how awesome that game is anytime. Okay, now, actually catching up on some comments here. Let's see. Considering a lot of structures in Limgrave were made by trolls, I wonder if they're like baby troll tombstones, kind of dark men. Oh, I like that idea a lot. Yeah, that's really cool. There needs to be some level of accessibility for players, yeah, but then again, I feel like Elden Ring is very different from like Toho, as the build crafting system is very generous. Toho is just pure good. Yeah, that's that's phrase. That's fair. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, I feel like, you know, there should also be games for people who want to have their ass kicked, right? Like, Toho is not a game for me, and while I would kind of like for there to be like an easy mode for me to try it out, and maybe there is, I just haven't looked that hard for it, I would also respect it if the dev said, you know what, I specifically want to make a game that is an extremely high level of skill for people who are experts, and I'm going to focus on just delivering them the best experience that I possibly can. I would totally respect that. I don't think that as a developer you're necessarily like obligated to make every possible version of your game for every possible audience. In fact, I think if you just decide who your audience is going to be and do your best to make your game as accessible and available to them as possible, meaning like you make the decisions that are right for the story, you make the decisions that are right for the mechanics and everything, but then you also consider like, okay, put in a colorblind mode, like maybe give different options to remap controls, because stuff like that, like add in subtitles, because stuff like that makes a huge difference for general accessibility regardless of like what your like intended demographic skill level is, if that makes sense. But no, I'm not like one of those people who those people, are there even such people, that say like you have to have a difficulty slider with every game to account for every like bracket of skill. One of the games that I love dearly is Thumper. It's a rhythm action game that is, it's really hard to describe it. It's basically like two of the developers on Rock Band or Guitar Hero, after working there for years, were like, you know what, actually fuck this, let's make something awesome. And not that Rock Band and Guitar Hero isn't awesome, but I think they had an experience, if I remember from the interview correctly, where they were pretty constrained creatively, and basically they were just pumping out chart after chart after chart for, you know, licensed music or whatnot. And they wanted to make something that was, in a way, restoring their own faith in the music genre, like music game genre in and of itself. And so they made something that is an incredibly aggressive, nightmare fueled, I don't know, like F-Zero meets Rock Band kind of experience that is my favorite rhythm game, and again, like, just an incredible game. I have never beaten it, and I probably never will. And it kind of sucks because I want to be able to see what's in the final levels myself and to experience it. I just don't have the musical skill to be able to pull it off. And I think the fact that I was able to get as far as I did in the game was partially a result of me having some musical skill at all. So somebody coming in with no musical background, with no like sense of rhythm or whatever, coming into Rock Band or Guitar Hero, there's tutorials, there's a way of easing you in, and most people I think could like pick up Guitar Hero and play Smoke on the Water or something in a few hours of practice. But Thumper, like, you have to be built different to beat that game, and I'm not. And that's okay. And I can look at that and be like, shit, I really wish I could finish it. But also, this game is what it is because you guys just decided you were going to go fucking crazy and you were going to do something that might not work for everybody. It might be like completely unreasonable, but also really, really fucking cool. And so, like, I'm glad that it exists, even though I sort of feel some FOMO about not being able to experience it all. H&H Debate says, oh my god, I love Soma, bro. Yes, the enemy design through my own experience is horrible and buggy. If anything, that just makes it better. Yeah. It's one of those things where I feel like instilling fear is appropriate, and if the enemies can do that, then that's appropriate too. But ultimately, I don't know, like, the immersion of the scary enemies, for me, like, breaks down pretty quickly. Their AI is pretty simple, and they are prone to just kind of getting stuck in loops. And so once, or also, they're really, really interesting, like, aesthetically. Like, I remember the designs of the creatures themselves being pretty cool, and so I didn't want to fight them or run away from them. I wanted to run up and just look at them. But the game was not, like, allowing me to do that, which, I mean, obviously that's me as a player working against the intended experience, so I don't think that, you know, that's a complaint or anything. But at the same time, I don't know, I didn't feel like I needed to be tested on my combat mechanics or whatever, or my ability to outsmart like a stalking AI in order to really appreciate what the game was trying to offer. It felt more like an accessory or an appendage to the game experience overall than a necessary, like, intrinsic part of it. The difficulty in Dark Souls, I think, is a necessary part of it, and I'm torn. I'm curious if you have a perspective. Do you think Dark Souls would benefit from an easy mode, or do you think it kind of needs to be one of those things where it's like, we picked this difficulty and we committed to it? Do you think it could have an easy mode that's, like, not just changing, like, some damage sliders or whatever, but actively, like, let's say the designers went through and they fine-tuned a unique easy mode specifically, you know, and it was something that was, like, enemy encounters or AI were tweaked or something like that to really make it a full-on mode, not just, like, a variable switch or something like that. Would that change the way you feel about it at all? I'll be focused a little bit as I deal with this encounter. Clearly and over my head a little bit. Did I just see 1,000 damage? Crazy. So this is cool. I really wish I knew more about those knights. I'm very intrigued by them, with the red sigil or whatever. Wait, do I not have a... Oh shit, I don't have a curing item. I did. Well, I have to very quickly see if I can defeat the encounter in time to get an Estus charge back. Probably not. Nope, I'm dead. Oh well. So that was cool though. So I got poisoned, and I thought I had a resource to be able to cure it, and I didn't. So now I'm kind of curious about maybe going back and looking for a way to equip myself better for next time. But I had realized that if I was able to defeat enough enemies, I could get a charge back. And so I decided, rather than running, I was going to stay and commit to the fight and see if I could, like, turn it around. And I came very, very close to. So even though I died there, I was I think just close enough that I feel like that was a really nice balance of different threats and opportunities for me to subvert those threats. Not to mention the introduction of the like resurrection mechanic. It was a little bit chaotic, and I think maybe the game is counting on you to have experienced some undead enemies more like over there first, but still pretty cool, pretty memorable encounter. I'm catching up on some chat now. Sorry. HNH Debate says, I want to be clear, by the way, with that, I meant the safe mode, as in, I don't even think of it as an accessibility thing. I think it's just generally better. Yes, I would agree. I think it can count as both, but I think it just, like, to me, that's the best or, like, most inherent, not correct way to play the game. Like, there's a wrong way to play it, but, you know, it feels right. Then I think the thing about aiming towards such certain audiences is more so of a personal preference, cultural or personal relatability thing. I feel like games such as Toho, which don't really have this problem, should have a difficulty slider, but obviously games devs don't share this idea. Yeah, I think people, both game devs and players, have very strong opinions about it, and that's fair. Nobody, myself included, nobody likes being left out or being felt like they're told like they're not good enough. And the elitists in any game community who say like you have to play it the way that we do or else, I think just make it worse. It's kind of unfortunate. Oh great, now I can use a shield again. 1 second. I was wondering if I can take one out. There we go. So I'm gonna take care of this little encounter over here. It is really cool to see that they implemented some squad-based like AI teams or whatever you want to call them. This was something that was done sort of in Dark Souls 3. Yeah, it was not sort of. It was done in Dark Souls 3. There was like the different knights that we were talking about before would fight each other. One thing that I really kind of wish that games would do is like I was saying, I was just playing Halo 4 recently, and there's a sequence where the Covenant and the Prometheans, I think they're called, are fighting each other, and I just decided, you know what, actually, I'm with the Covenant. Like, we have a history, we've been able to get along. These Prometheans are the new enemy. Screw it. I'm gonna help the Covenant take down the Prometheans. And so I completely ignored the Covenant, and I just dealt with the Prometheans, and they still attacked me. They still went after me. And now, granted, there could be a narrative justification for that. These particular Covenant are, I think they're banished or something like that. They're basically not privy to the treaties or whatever that humanity might have forged. So maybe they're just bloodlusted and they're attacking everything on sight. That's fine. But with this particular example as well, like, why does everyone hate me? Why does everyone just want my blood? Can't I pick a side? Can't I help someone? Can't I at least like try to resolve something with a technique that is not just hit thing with sword or hit other thing with sword? And then this veers into a larger discussion about people call Elden Ring an RPG. As much as I adore this game, I don't think that term is correct. And I wonder sometimes if there should be more role-playing elements involved in the game, but I do think that's open for debate. So anyway, catching up on chat a little bit here. I think the thing about aiming towards problems should be difficulty slider. I don't think it would hurt in relation to the experience of a general audience, but I do believe playing something like Elden Ring on easy mode will inhibit your experience. Yeah, that's probably fair. But what experience is there to have if you can't even beat it? That's true as well. Well, I guess that's where people would say like, okay, Dark Souls 1 does actually have an easy mode. It's called multiplayer. It's called NPC summons. It's called like the Estus flask upgrades and the or like it's burning the effigies at the bonfire to increase your Estus flask. It's going and grinding and getting better gear and participating in covenants and stuff like that. Maybe the Forest Keeper's Covenant or whatnot, until you just get better equipment. Like, it's those sorts of things, right? So there is, they would probably say, a difficulty slider. It's just built into the world, and I actually really like that idea. Of course, it's given like the fact that it is something that's more implicit. It's not something that everybody is going to pick up on. So as a designer, or as a game developer rather, I respect the choice, and I would say that's probably the right way to do it, especially for a game that's as immersive as Dark Souls. And also, it's not quite as ambassadorial as something like a difficulty option or like a story mode would be. So, again, I think there's a little bit of nuance there. Like, if an easy mode, or responding to sorry, I keep getting that wrong, HNH debates, like if an easy mode made someone like my mom or a family member play the game with me and bridge this cultural gap, that would be so insanely cool. Yeah, I totally agree. It would be amazing to be able to not just like share this with my family by having them watch, but actually let them get inside the game and feel what it's like to explore it, you know. And I know that there are like friends or like people in my extended like friends group, so to speak. One of my friends, his wife doesn't play video games, but he is a big Souls fan, and she will watch him play, and she has no experience playing video games. She's tried to play a little bit, and like just struggles to move the camera around like this. Like she hasn't built that muscle memory, and it takes hours and hours to really be able to do it whatchamacallit, uh, intuitively without thinking about it. And so she just doesn't have the time to do that. But if it were a little bit easier, if there were like a better auto camera system or something like that, I think that would be a possibility, and I think it would be something that she would really enjoy. As I was saying that, I was trying to see, like, can I get away with playing this game without manually operating the camera? And I guess I technically can. But, man, something about taking my thumb off of the right control stick just feels wrong. Like, no, I have to be moving the camera. It's just something that's like, I don't even think about it. It's just in my brain, you know? And I need it to to feel safe, I guess. Let's see. I love the random encounters with stuff like this happening where you see enemies fighting each other, but the fact that every time you respawn, it's the same people fighting makes it feel kind of uninteresting. Yep, that's a fair criticism for sure. Or a fair observation for sure. Something that, so, you know, I've mentioned now that I enjoy the Halo games. I also tried getting into into Destiny for a little while. And I really like the, it would be really cool is if the sunflowers actually turned to face the sun, or at least the Erd tree. I'm gonna try and keep an eye out for that. See if that happens later. But anyway, really tried to get into Destiny because I have a couple of like colleagues who speak very, very highly of it and really enjoy it. And I liked the enemy design, and I liked some of the world design. I really wanted to. But the first thing I remember is getting in and playing for an hour and getting to like this big spider robot that almost looked like something. Is this a death ahead thing? Not here ahead, yeah. Doesn't look like I'd be able to make that jump. That big spider, like armored scarab robot thing, and defeating it and having a pretty good encounter with it, with a couple other random players that just sort of joined. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, they weren't people that I signed up with for like with a party. They were just sort of randomly and seamlessly like integrated into my game session, and that was really cool. And I really enjoyed taking down the boss with them. And then I went up on this hill and I was trying to look around to figure out what I was going to do next. And then I saw that same fucking boss like respawn or get airdropped back in or whatever it was, and I was like, okay, no, I'm done. Which might be unfair. Clearly, there's been a lot of amazing work done on that game, but at the same time, I can't. I felt like what I had just done had been invalidated. It just felt like an MMO, and MMOs at least can carry themselves on the social interaction aspect of it. But for that particular game, I don't know, especially since I wasn't with a party, there was no direct communication or anything like that, I really felt cheated. And I was just like, I need a more tangible sense of narrative context to indicate that the things that I'm doing are having an effect. Now, you can argue that's hypocritical of me because, narratively speaking, futility is one of the like recurring themes of Souls games, but it's a oh my god. It's a futility that's also coupled with tangible effects on the world. Like, things do change as a result of your actions, even if it's just people, like important people dying, I guess. Now, I will say, not a fan of that at all. I do like the idea that this is a heavily fortified place, and it should be difficult to get into, but I kind of feel like that implementation was pretty janky. Ow. And the way that projectile tracked was pretty janky. I don't feel like... so something exploded. I'm not entirely clear on whether it was the projectile itself or whether there was like an exploding object near me. In Dark Souls 2, there were barrels that had, I think, like pitch or tar on them, and if you swung a fire sword at them, like swung a weapon at them that had a fire enchantment on it, they would explode, or threw a firebomb at them, they'd explode. And it was pretty, maybe ambiguous the first time, but it was made pretty clear, like, what the explosive barrels were. And they did it in an intelligent way that they didn't have to, like, smear red paint all over it or put a big black X on it or something like that. I don't feel like I was adequately given an opportunity to predict that that was going to happen. It, granted, like, being surprised or being caught off guard by something isn't necessarily a bad thing. Being taught to respect situations like this where a fucking ballista is pointed at my head is not a bad thing, but I think potentially they could have done more work to, like, signify that the thing was going to explode, or make me understand as a player, like, why it exploded at least. I will say it's also potentially a missed opportunity to not be able to fire a ballista bolt. It's not the end of the world, but you could do that in Dark Souls 2. And I think there might have been something similar to that in Dark Souls 3, where you could, like, get behind. Oh no, I'm thinking of the giants when you go up to the area where they're shooting ballista bolts at the giant sandworm thing. You can stop the ballista bolts from firing, but you can't actually fire them yourself. But anyway, yeah, there could have been an opportunity for you to, like, subvert it and, like, fire it at people coming up the bridge or something. So it's a little disappointing that some of these, like, apparently dynamic actors in the game then wind up being static when it comes to, like, how you as a player actually interact with them. Okay, so catching up again. I appreciate all the comments and all the discussion. By the way, it's really cool to be able to have a back and forth about this. So thank you for the engagement. H&H says, I think I'm caught up there. Yeah, as a D2 player, you made a good decision not continuing down that path. It's like an abusive relationship, unironically, as much as I love the game. Oh, that's sad to hear. I listened to what's the name of that show? Skill Up. Yeah. So I don't read or consume a whole lot of, like, traditional game reviews or games journalism, but I will listen to Skill Up once a week for the, like, This Week in Video Games. And I highly recommend it as just, like, a roundup of industry news and releases and cool things to kind of keep your eyes open for. A lot of good game recommendations come out of there as well. And, every once in a while he kind of mentions his, semi-abusive relationship that he's on the receiving end of the abuse with Destiny 2. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to check it out, because even though he's very transparent about the game's flaws, he also sings its praises, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, this sounds like it's worth checking out. But unfortunately, it just didn't quite click for me. I guess I'm glad I escaped. Like, anytime somebody says, hey, I've heard about this cool game called, like, League Legends or something, it's got leagues in it, it's got legends in it, I like both of those things. I'm like, no, please, you don't know what you're about to do, stop before it's too late. And, like, no disrespect to Riot as developers, like, there are a lot of very talented people on that team who have made some amazing art, the game and sound, and who have implemented some compelling systems. The game itself is a very, I should change my flasks anyway, the game itself is very good for what it is. They've managed to essentially keep the same stupid, simple gameplay loop for 1 second. Nope. For 20 years, not 20 years, like over 10 years now, something like that, with the same one fucking map, and they've succeeded in maintaining that one map with that one gameplay loop for that amount of time. And there is something to be said for that. It is satisfying, it is compelling, it is interesting. It's just all of, like, the microtransactions and the, I guess, like, the storefront and the way that the storefront kind of, like, controls the game. The way that you are actively punished for doing well and, like, incentivized to, not incentivized, but, like, pressured into losing artificially on a regular basis to then try to funnel you into making purchases and jumping on the latest, like, purchasing trends. To me, it's kind of gross, and it like feeds into this loop of addiction that I know for a fact is deliberately cultivated. I know for a fact that people there worked specifically to make the game addictive, like, not as part of it, oh, it'll be fun, so people will keep coming back to play more. But like, no, we need people to literally get like brain chemically addicted to this thing so they'll buy more skins. And so I'm like, no, please just like stay away from it.
Hello? Is somebody there? Might I bend your ear for a moment, please? My name is Irina. I've escaped from Castle Morn to the south. The servants there have rebelled. I can't be sure what it is. My eyesight's been weak since birth, you see. But I swear I heard frightful howling from all over. My good father secreted me out the castle, but decided himself to stay. He says it's his duty. As commander.
Interesting. I'm trying to figure out like what accent she has, and I don't know what it is, but it does sound very, very similar to Box.
I fear for father's life. The servants are full of wrath, filled with hatred for every one of us. They've since come for every one of the companions I escaped with. They haven't spared a soul. I fear it's no different at Castle Morn. Please, I implore you, would you mind taking a letter to my father? At the castle, my soul wishes that he escape, even if his honor should be the price. Please. I just want him to be safe. Thank you. Dearly. Then please, take this.
Oh, whoops.
Deliver it to my father.
Kind of ruined the moment.
In the castle, if you please.
Yeah, so I think it's probably not a coincidence, right? That the place that's, well, I guess it's the misbegotten, not the demi-humans. So maybe I'm speaking a little out of turn here, but the two people that we have heard speak with this particular kind of accent are associated with creatures that are similar to human beings, but are also like lesser in stature and not obviously treated very well. So I'm curious if there's meant to be a connection there, or maybe if this is just like the Morn accent, right? They're from the Weeping Peninsula. They're both from this area, and so that's the only thing that we need to read into, I guess. Destiny 2 is kind of like Zion Williamson, if you understand that analogy. I'm afraid I don't, but I could look it up. The game is built off the potential of what it can be. It has so many amazing things in it, but for every amazing thing, it's 10 bad ones. Yeah, it's a shame when that sort of thing happens. Bungie execs are so scummy, and yes, you're right. If you didn't spend as much money on Destiny 2 as I have, I would definitely stop playing now. Yeah, that's how they get their hooks into you, right? Arena's subplot, so sad, bro. Yeah, it's it really is. And the way that her body is then like taken over by, I forget her name, by Hyetta, I think her name is also really, really weird and unsettling. Cool though, very, very cool idea. That's then we see that happen with Yura, I forget his name, the samurai guy who then gets taken over by Shibiri. Trying to think about if there's anything we can glean from her character. It's a very, very simple outfit. Her eyes being obscured is obviously very interesting, as well as the blood around her knees. Her dialogue made it kind of seem like she heard about the fighting or whatever, but wasn't directly involved in it. But then we actually see that right here. So this is something that I think potentially you could critique a little bit. We have soldiers over here, including soldiers with the giant fucking exploding ballista bolts or whatever they are, and we also have soldiers right over here. These soldiers are dead, and then literally like a 30-second walk away, we have a series of enemies that are like butchering soldiers, and they are right there. And so yeah, okay, we're gonna fight through them and get to the castle, but the fact that there's no option to be like, hey, can you go literally anywhere else? Can you even just go where those soldiers are with the ballista and hang out with them? Because this is a terrible idea. You're going to die immediately. You're in hostile territory. There are corpses littered right around you. So I could see somebody coming into this game and seeing this and being like, this character is acting completely irrational and this breaks my immersion. It didn't bother me that much, but it does feel like, a little bit more primitive, I guess, in its implementation compared to something like, I don't know, Baldur's Gate 3, which I think is a really good RPG. You probably have different options to tell her to go, like either come with you or go fuck off and go hide or something. So, I know it might be time for Fromsoftware to start advancing their RPG mechanics a little bit. Irina is played by Claire Corbett, a British voice actress. Oh, cool. So is her dad, Edgar, played by Richard Hainsworth. Okay, cool. Nice. I appreciate you looking that up. Yeah, manipulation through physical dominance is a very prominent symbol through Elden Ring. What comes to mind is Yura being taken over by Shabiri, yes, and the fight for power between Radagon and America. Yeah, that's true. A theme, I think, also of just, like, sharing bodies, having your body overtaken and overwhelmed, but also, like, having your soul or personality or something like that split up between multiple physical entities is another thing that keeps coming up. The duality is, I guess, a glib way of putting it. So this is kind of interesting, actually. So we have sort of a emaciated patrol dog, and what is this guy doing exactly? Is he just sort of like mourning the loss of his fallen comrade? I love that. Yeah, so I love that we are getting another view of. One sec, let me deal with this dog. The dogs tend to be pretty good at getting me. I love that we're seeing another instance of these carts. Like, we've seen them before. They've obviously they're obviously evocative, and they've generated some kind of significance for us if we've been paying attention at all. And now we see one of them being overturned, which suggests that, okay, well, these things are sometimes, not always, but sometimes pulled by giants, and it's along the same path, and it's off to the side. And there's a giant over here. Okay, so what happened exactly? Were these soldiers, moving along with this giant, and then they were ambushed by the animals and the misbegotten, and sort of the cart went off to the side? It's an interesting little bit of storytelling. I think it would have potentially, that case would have been made more strong if this giant had some wounding or something. But the fact that the giant is passive and just kind of like hanging out there might suggest that, the last time we saw one that passive was when they were part of the caravan as well. So maybe the other giant died, and then this one just kind of went off and hid on the side while the dogs feasted on the corpses. I don't know for sure, but I like the fact that they've clearly gone out of their way to set up this little diorama or whatever and give us some like an opportunity to wonder about the story that's kind of happening behind the scenes. And then we see the misbegotten, and we're just like, oh, okay, we get a chance to observe them from afar. They're kind of woven in and out of the pieces of what do you call them, the props there, the carts and stuff like that. We see a mixture of soldiers, and I think it's mostly soldiers at this point, right? But I think we saw some like of the nobles, like the wandering nobles back there that had been whoa, like the dogs were eating them. I really like the fact that these enemies, despite like being sort of roughshod in their appearance, are, they're already showing like pretty new and pretty distinct movesets, jumping through the air, fluttering around. They're jumping above our characters, like up to the point where our head is, so they're kind of getting out of the normal range that we would swing our weapons at, so we have to be on our toes. That was a great little introduction to those characters. And then aesthetically as well, like if you just look at them, they're this awesome sorry, my voice cracked there. This awesome amalgamation of all of these different body parts. Like, it's part lizard, part chicken, part I don't know, snake. There's a whole bunch of different things that are kind of wrapped up in there, and the face almost looks like it kind of reminds me, a little harder to see on that guy over there, but when they're running at you, it kind of reminds me a little bit of the face in the moon in Majora's Mask, where it has this almost inscrutable expression that's like a mixture between joy and pain and confusion, and just like really, really cool. Let me catch up on some messages. Manipulation through physical dominance, yeah. I think she's sitting there because she's blind. It doesn't seem she knows where to go. But why doesn't the yeah, why doesn't the tarnished move? Yeah, it's a good point that I probably should have addressed. Like, she can't fucking see. Probably should have mentioned that. But yeah, like, I feel like there's an opportunity. Not that like FromSoft has an obligation to do this, but there's an opportunity there for a little bit more for your character to do something. And sometimes it feels like, well, what's wrong with my guy? In Dark Souls 1, you could argue, or even 2, you could argue, well, he's just a hollow, and he doesn't really, like, function normally. Maybe just has social anxiety or whatever. Or, like, as a hollow, probably not, thinking along those terms, might not even be capable of thinking along those terms. Especially, actually, a better example would be the Ashen one in Dark Souls 3. Because the Ashen one is basically like a weird, gross amalgamation of dust and ash from different, like, corpses and graves and stuff that's being mashed together into this, like, weird human golem that then fills itself up with other souls. It's, like, really terrifying, actually, when you think about what your character is in Dark Souls 3. And so that character not giving a single fuck about the plights of people around them kind of makes a bit more sense. But I don't know, the Tarnished seem to have more, like, distinct backstories. I don't see why they couldn't have put in a little bit more room for expression. Let's see. Wow, as soon as I type that, you say the same thing. Yeah, great minds think alike, right? The fat roll terrifies me every time, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, I'm sorry, I kind of was more paying attention to the chat, and so I didn't realize I must have triggered people watching. Sorry for that. Just need to put a few extra points into endurance or whatever it is. Endurance, what is the stat called? Yeah, it is endurance. Okay. Yeah, I don't know if you... I mean, look, it's... people play the game in different ways. I don't think there's anything inherently, like, bannable about fat rolling. But it was, not to get too political or anything, but going back and remembering, like, Elon Musk's fat roll build that became a meme for a while, which is pretty funny, especially considering, like, the, I don't know, I haven't really looked into it. I'm trying not to, like, talk too much about, like, things that could be politically adjacent, but I guess, Elon Musk, like, paid somebody to level up, a character for him in Path of Exile, and then bragged about how he was one of the best Path of Exile players in the world, and then he went on stream to try and prove this, but, like, didn't understand how to manage his inventory, didn't know, like, what to click on or how to play it all. And so it's just kind of hilarious. Like, if you want to play the game, just play the fucking game. It's cool. I bet like thousands of people would have showed up to watch Elon Musk be a total noob and scrub at Path of Exile and just chill and, like, enjoy him playing the game and discovering it. And instead, like, well, you know, same thing with Elden Ring. Like, why not talk to people and, like, come up with a build together? Anyway, kind of getting off topic. But, Elon Musk, the pro Path of Exile and Elden Ring gamer. Yeah. It's we live in interesting times for sure. Now, something that I have mixed feelings about, I'd be curious if you have a take on this, is random drops. So when I first played this game, I got lucky, and I'm going to die. Damn it. I got lucky, and I stumbled across one of these pools of water that had a, also these enemies are, I think, maybe not the best. Yeah, let me talk about these guys first. So I like the idea of having fauna that can be hostile, or even just, like, more passive and, like, a natural part of the world. I love that they're including some enemy types that aren't just, you know, rabid dogs and bears and stuff like that. There's insects, and the octopode. There are a lot of interesting like, literal enemies, if that makes sense. But at the same time, that one in particular, the implementation is a little weird because given how fast it flies around, it will cause your camera to whip around if you're on lock-on, and if you don't log on, it then also will potentially just get out of your field of vision very quickly. Okay. And so it just becomes really hard to deal with. You basically just have to sort of stand there and wait until it comes up and bonks you. If you roll out of the way, I feel like you don't necessarily have a great... sorry, should have done endurance. Oh, it's fine. If you roll out of the way, then there's a good chance that it'll just reset, and then you have to wait again. And then I personally find the way that it pans around you to be pretty disorienting and like kind of like nausea-inducing if I let it happen for too long. So that's one of the things where, I don't know, it's not a mistake or anything. I just kind of feel like the way it's implemented, it was a difficult problem to solve, and there could have been a better solution. The thing I was going to ask you guys about was, do you have a thought on like random loot drops in the game? The first time I was playing, I found the octopus head pretty early on. Let me just make sure this is the right thing. Yeah. And that was something that I, like an item that I really enjoyed. And I have played the game on various platforms for probably a total of 1,000 hours over the years, including the DLC. And I have never found that fucking octopus head ever again. And I did grind for it at one point for like 2 or 3 hours, and it didn't come up. And I don't know, to me, that feels like a bad thing. In Dark Souls 2, I think they introduced this. It might have been in 1. When you would kill the mimics, the mimic chest would always have a chance of dropping a given item. And that person did well. They would always have a chance of dropping a given item. Now, you wouldn't always get one, but if you killed all the mimics in the game, they would eventually drop all the possible items you had. So it was like weighted randomness, I guess. If you had 5 mimics, and they could possibly drop 2 items, like the mimic headpiece and something else, like a humanity or whatever. You could kill the first 3 of them and not have them drop. But then on the 4th and the 5th one, the 4th one was guaranteed to drop the humanity, and the 5th one was guaranteed to drop the headpiece, something like that. So I think that that's more fair. It guarantees that if you're persistent and you explore and you're thorough and all that, then you will eventually get the stuff you're looking for. The stuff where it's like you just have to hope to get lucky, and there's items with like 1% drop chances from one specific enemy in one specific spot, I guess it does create like a legend surrounding the weapon, you know, in the same way that like that it would in an MMO, where you as a designer are, I guess at that point, designing more for the community as a whole than a player, and like any one player in particular, right? Because you're trying to create this narrative around the item being rare and special, and it's more about that narrative emerging like naturally within the player base as a whole, as opposed to any one given player being guaranteed to have that experience. And I like that, you know, rare things are cool because they're rare. But at the same time, my personal subjective experience is that I just want that fucking octopus head. I just want the head. I want to wear it because it's cool. I don't want to have to like kill the same enemies for like multiple hours to have a chance of getting it and then maybe never get it. That to me, it just doesn't. I guess like I feel like I lost the lottery, and I'm really glad that somebody else out there gets to have fun with this. But I also played the game and took it seriously and fought the enemies and scoured the environment, and like I would like to have my reward, please. So anyway. I think H&H Debate says, I think random loot drops in games are fine, but the fact that certain things have a 0.5% drop chance and take an hour to farm in super unengaging ways too is such a hilariously bad oversight. Yes. I farmed a sword for 2 hours in this game before, and it made me genuinely not want to play for a couple days. Was it the Wandering Noble's longsword? I hear that there's a longsword that has a very low drop chance, and it looks like kind of dinky, but it apparently has just really, really excellent reach and a great moveset. Or like maybe really great scaling, something like that. Oh, Noble Slender Sword, I think is what it is, right? Yeah, I've never gotten that, and I'm not going to ever grind for it because it has such an absurdly low drop rate. What's frustrating though too is that like before everybody had gone through and found all the like data mined everything and found everything on the wiki in the data sets, and then put everything onto the wikis. When you were trying to figure out lore, when the game first dropped, like the first month or so, none of that shit was available, and so some of the items that actually have really interesting lore implications are just not going to be available to most players. Like, what, I only get the story, like I only get to experience the story myself through my own exploration if I get a 1 in 1,000 drop or something like that. That doesn't really seem fair. I guess you could argue that, well, maybe the story is just meant to be a community, or the lore is meant to be a community discovery thing from the get-go, and that's fine. You know, there's nothing inherently wrong with that again, but I personally wish that I could reasonably find everything in the game myself if I, you know, worked hard enough in a way that wasn't like grindy and randomized. If I wanted to discover all the lore myself, I could just do so by playing normally and carefully and in an invested way, but not in like grinding doesn't feel like engaging with the game in its intended core loop, so to speak. Anyway, let's see what you had to say. The good thing about mimics to me is that there's a definitive fair way to get it that's designed purely through the means of the player, not a random probability assigned by the game, while still keeping it special and rare. Yeah, I think that totally makes sense. Yeah, it was that. Don't even think it's that good. I just wanted it. Yeah. So maybe it's kind of my fault, man, but I still hate I had to find out the hard way. No, I mean, like, I want that sword as well. It sounds cool. I hear people talking about it. And I don't know. Maybe there's a like a compromise where rather than making it like pure random, what the developers could do is they could make it an incentive for co-op or something like that, and then the co-op has an element of randomness to it. So let's say you get an item every 5 times you help somebody in co-op defeat a boss, and then that item is like a currency that you can spend on unlocking something. So every time you do 5 co-ops, you get like I don't know, a pure essence, and you can take the pure essence to the smith, and he can give you, you know, a special sword, or even just like give you a 100% drop chance. Like the next time you fight an enemy, they will 100% drop something for you, anything like that. And that way, it like still lets you engage with. You're not getting like a 1-to-1 guarantee that you're going to get the exact loot that you want at any given time. However, it does give you a clear and fair path to achieving it. Like you could team up with people 5 times in a row and lose against the boss 5 times in a row, but you're still going through the experience of like having a boss encounter with some friends or with some co-op people, and that is much more rewarding, I think, and fun, even if you fail, than literally just like standing in a field killing the same enemy over and over again and then like reloading. That feels kind of artificial in a way that, you know, happening to fail a boss encounter doesn't. I will say, I was kind of rambling for a little bit, but I will say I do very much like the ballista over there. I think it's a nice way of kind of continuing this ongoing narrative of the conflict between the demi-humans and the soldiers. The way that it was introduced felt really natural too. Like I definitely wasn't expecting to see anything there, and then all of a sudden I just see like the ballista bolts explode and come like rocketing down the side. It obviously like pulls the player's gaze and interest up to the side of the mountain, so I felt like I had a reason to go explore up there. And then that kind of brought me through the encounter with the Miranda blossoms, or whatever they're called, like the smaller plants. So that was a really cool. I like the red eye mechanic as well. Again, that is sort of further weighting the gameplay experience towards playing at night, which is again not necessarily a bad thing, but I think things just get more and more interesting over the course of nighttime compared to excuse me, compared to the day. And I will say that, like, it is kind of hard to find somewhere that feels like a waste of time. Like, I've not been paying attention to the map at all. I've not been really trying to pursue any specific objective. I even forgot, like, what I was trying to do specifically, or where I was specifically going. And the game has just been leading me down this natural path, and I feel like, well, listen to the creaking on the bridge too. One sec. Yeah, it's a nice nice little touch. I think they're adding in a little bit of extra, like, hollow textured wind as you are across the gorge, and then of course they intensify the sound of the creaking on the bridge too. Again, it's one of those things where it's like, well, of course they would, like, you have to do that, but not everybody thinks of that, and it's a nice little detail. Let's see. To take a page out of D2's book, they have this thing called weapon focusing, where if you focus a certain drop or weapon, you're more likely to get it than if you didn't. You can increase the probability while still grinding as the dev intended. Really? I didn't know that. Oh, you mean Destiny 2? I thought you meant Dark Souls 2. I was like, oh, that's cool. I can definitely, like, I've been thinking about doing another playthrough, and that would definitely help with finding certain things. I love the design of these characters too. So, on the one hand, we are starting to move further and further away from our starting area, and we're starting to see more and more things that look like humans but aren't quite human. And before we get to the actual, like, what are they called, like the Erdtree avatars or anything like that, we see these characters that are in robes that feel like they could come out of the same wardrobe as some of the noble garb that we've seen before. Definitely seem to be pretty refined and shiny and all that. And they're referred to, I believe, as guardians, right? Let's take a look at the sword spear here. Weapon comprising a long handle and broad blade sharpened with the hardwood of old trees. So that's really interesting. It looks like a metal weapon, but it's actually made out of wood. Wielded by guardians of the minor Erdtrees known as experts in the arts of combat, the power of this weapon scales greatly with dexterity. So, learning a lot about these characters just from this little interaction. The weapon that they wield looks as though it's as hard as metal, but, well, I guess you can interpret that line as maybe it was sharpened using wood as opposed to it's made out of wood, but I think it's made out of wood. Very ornate design, very lovely pattern and texture on it overall, not to mention that there's that nice twisty, like, double helix down the middle. I love the fact that the spear, like the very tip of the spear, is separated from the lower aspect of it. I don't know if that makes sense, but, like, there's a tip to it that's slightly separated. It has, like, an indentation on it. A lot of really, really cool design that went into the spear, and I think specifically referring to it as a sword spear too gives it almost a more pronounced feeling. I don't know how to describe it, but there are a lot of swords and great swords and everything, but sword spears are a pretty rare and exotic type of weapon. Dark Souls players will also probably associate that with things like the Nameless King and the just like the Warriors of Sunlight Covenant and all that. I believe there's that one of the characters associated with that whole part of the narrative wields a sword spear specifically. So I think that they might be subtly hinting at, like, hey, you guys, you know what this is. This is going to be related to, like, the quote unquote good gods covenant, right? Like, maybe the one associated with that giant shining tree that's totally beautiful and great, and there's nothing wrong with that, I promise. Something like that. And the fact that they have, like, The tree growing out of their backs also looks like a form of pus almost. Like it looks like it's beautiful in a certain sense, but it also looks diseased. It looks like it's like hemorrhaging and bursting out from their skin. So Miyazaki has said in interviews that he always like encourages his designers to create characters that have a mixture of the macabre, but also something of elegance to them. Like he wants all of his characters to feel like there's something beautiful or something noble, even if that nobility has been tarnished, no pun intended, or otherwise like broken over the years. There has to be something noble about them. They can't be too grotesque or too like I guess over the top in that regard. Ceaseless discharge, right? Like he can't just have all the gross pus and boils and everything. He has to also has to have the aspect of humanity where you see his face, you see the emotion and the anguish in his eyes, and things like that, right? So we have a character who has the nobility and the like shiny attire and all that, and then the connection to this potentially holy tree that they're guarding, but then also the thing is erupting from their back like a diseased organ or something. It's terrifying. Anyway. I just noticed, I think that chair is the same kind of chair that Selen has in her office. And I wonder if it's just like a generic shared chair asset, or if we're supposed to be like, well, these chairs are used by a certain group of people or whatnot, and try to connect them. Probably not. Probably reading too much into it. I like these guys a lot. I like the incorporation of spirits and like spiritual things. It is kind of interesting. I don't know if this is intentional or not, but it is interesting that the book, or I'm not sure what that thing is around his neck. It almost looks like a stockade. Is that what the term for it is? Like when you like a pillory. Damn it! I need to look up my like medieval a punishment tool terms or whatever the fuck. But yeah, it kind of looks like it might be used to bind someone's hands or something like that, to like case them in or something like that. Anyway, interesting that it seems like it's almost swaying in the wind, and I wonder if that is meant to if we're supposed to interpret this as how can I phrase this? I'm way overthinking this, but basically the thing around his neck is swinging back and forth, as if it were swinging back and forth in the wind. Now, you could look at that and say, maybe the intention here was for us to think that he has some kind of physical presence in the world. So even though he's like shiny and shimmery and transparent, there's still a physical, tangible part of him, and we can tell that by the fact that his thing is swinging around as if wind were blowing it. The other option is they just have a model for a guy like this, and the physics asset, like the physics enabled component of that model is just set to do this automatically, or they just have like a simple looping animation that's not even physics enabled, that's just like a looping part of his like skeletal mesh, and they just have it doing that. So this is where my developer brain sometimes gets in the way of me just being able to enjoy. Because I'm like, but why did they make it do it? Anyway, let me go rest. Let's see. Maybe another thing that kind of relates to the gold point: grand, beautiful things taking over the bodies of others. Yeah, absolutely. I think gold gets in people's bodies and then like pushes through and exerts its influence in a variety of different ways. A lot of them not very good. Maybe another thing that kind of relates to the gold point. Oh, yeah, I just read that. I'm sorry. The guy bent over the chair looks more like a random Stormvale servant than a sorcerer. I'd assume the chair is just a random stock model. That's true. I think you're absolutely right. It's one of the... he's the same kind of person as Gostock, right? The guy who encourages you to go around the side when you go to Stormvale. Yeah, the thing around his neck is also what Gostock has, I think. Maybe it's an escaped prisoner. Yeah, that could very well be. I like that take. So let's talk to Melina real quick.
Spoken echoes linger here. Words of Queen Marika, who vanished long ago. If you wish, I will share them with you. In Marika's own words, then, after thy death, I will give back what I once claimed, return to the lands between, wage war, and brandish the Elden Ring, grow strong in the face of death. Warriors of my lord, Lord Godfrey.
So there's a couple of things that I wonder about with that. I really like the lore. I like the story. I like the fact that it's being delivered to you in a non-linear way. I remember somebody once saying, or maybe this is just one of those Twitter things that kind of became like slightly viral and maybe it was treated unfairly. But I think somebody on Twitter posted that Elden Ring doesn't have like a journal or a logbook where you can write down notes and stuff. And you can't, the map markers are very bare bones. I mean, granted, like you can add these over here, but they're a little ambiguous as to what they are. And so the person was saying because it doesn't have features like that, it's an accessibility issue. Accessibility issue. Basically, the game has failed to meet its obligation of supplying players with the proper tools, especially players who have like memory issues or ADHD or whatever, to be able to fully enjoy it. And that's a fault of the player, so to speak, of the developer, so to speak. I don't know that I agree that Fromsoftware obligated to do that. However, when I played through the game the first time, they didn't have the little golden icon next to talk to Melina, so I missed like quite a few, like this thing over here, indicating that it was possible. So I missed like a few of her pieces of dialogue. I also have a shit memory, and so if I'm not actively writing things down or recording them, then I'm not going to remember them. And the moment that Melina said that, I was like, wow, that's really cool. I think I got the name Marika, and I'll probably remember that for later. Given that the other bits of the story are revealed non-linearly, you have no reasonable, easy way to go back and repeat those things and revisit those elements of the story if you've forgotten them. So I think there could have been a better way to implement that. I don't know why they couldn't have found some way, for example, to just give you the option to replay her dialogue or give you a little logbook or something like that. If it's not immersion breaking for you to pick up a sword and read like an entry about the sword's owner and the country that it was from, you know, however many aeons ago before the game, if that can be considered a form of reading and ingesting content that is still like on par with the way the game wants you to immerse in its content, then I think having a journal or something like that would be totally reasonable. That being said, I wanted to point out also, this is pretty obvious. Who is groaning? Oh, it's this guy. Oh, okay, I'll leave you to it then. It was great. I just wanted to point out here, pretty obvious, I know, but like, it is really cool that places where the golden tears fall, or where, you know, in Churches of America or Radagon, you will tend to see golden flowers kind of accumulating around the base. I don't know if it's because it's around America and Radagon so much as it is around, that it's grouping around the tear itself, though. Maybe it's like the tear is spilling out and turning things gold. And on the one hand, it's very beautiful to see the, you know, the golden stuff. But on the other hand, you can consider that these plants maybe aren't supposed to be gold. And the fact that there's gold just spilling out all over the place and leaching itself into the plants and turning everything around it the same color, that's kind of scary. It's spreading, you know, like a plague, like an infestation. Not to mention these little guys. actually want to check their lore description real quick. Is it in the next one? Yeah, okay, here we go. The golden desiccated remains of a centipede, material used for crafting items, kept as a fetish by Golden Order fundamentalists, especially the hunters of those who live in death. As such, they're found near churches and similar. So that's interesting. Centipedes in previous Souls games have been associated with stagnation and with like stagnant blood and stuff like that. And it's counterintuitive but cool to see that they're now being associated with churches and with people who hunt death. The long story short is that dead things are seen as being like sort of contrary to the natural flow of life, and so in the same way that like a stagnant pool of water attracts insects and all manner of like filth like that, like it just becomes gross and filled with stuff, the same thing could be true of like a stagnant form of life or something that goes against the natural flow of the world. It just attracts vermin and parasites and gross things. And centipedes are the ones, is like a consistent theme. It's in Sekiro, it's in Bloodborne, I guess it's in here a little bit, of how Fromsoftware chooses to represent that sort of stuff. So the idea that people in the Golden Order who are opposed to those who live in death and hunt them down would keep these trinkets that are symbols of what happens, you know, when you let things stagnate. That's kind of cool. It's like a memento mori or something like that, right? Where it's like, I'm going to keep this with me to, you know, stay aware of the nature of my task. Maybe it's something like that. And here we have probably my favorite thing of the game, but also one of the more disappointing things in my opinion. Let me check chat real quick before I talk about it, and then I'm probably going to wrap things up for the night. I'd hoped to start earlier, but it is getting kind of late, so I'll probably have to do a slightly shorter stream tonight. Anyway, I don't really have a problem, says HNH Debates, with the lack of a logbook, but I think the quests lack a clear path of progression, kind of as if the following events are a then instead of a therefore. Yeah, that's a good point. You just kind of, when I'm going through the quest progression, I tend to just find the character, talk to the character, leave the area, find the character, talk to the character, right? It feels a little bit perfunctory, or it feels like a task as opposed to some sort of like organic progression of their life and your relationship with them. I guess Luca Teal in Dark Souls 2 comes to mind as a character that I think was implemented pretty well. Do gotta say, I love the little roaming herds of animals that they put in places. Not only are they good for resources if you actually take the time to kill them and harvest them, but also they just add a lot of life to the area, you know. One thing that might have been cool is seeing, like in Skyrim, how they would have various, like wolves would sometimes attack other animals, like non-hostile animals, and the world itself felt like a little bit more alive. This does kind of feel like a designer just placed a group of sheep here and then gave them like an invisible pen to live in, as opposed to them feeling like they were, you know, in a game with, I guess, more emphasis on those open world components. We might see more tracks on the ground. We might see more like droppings from them, or little areas where they were going to graze. I guess it makes sense, like, okay, here maybe they're going to eat on the berries over here. None of this is a flaw. It's just like more opportunity for them to potentially make them feel like an even more active part of a living, breathing world. But anyway, getting off topic. It's kind of ironic, says H&H, that the gold is correlated with hunting death and stopping unnatural things, yet the yellow coloring of these flowers is unnatural. Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's kind of hinting at the fact that we should be cautious about making too many assumptions about gold just because it's beautiful or alluring or whatever. We should be very wary of the influence that it's potentially going to have. Before you wrap it up, do you have a Discord server or username? If not, I'd definitely suggest making one. Yeah, I need to go through the process of actually setting up the server. I do have one set up, but it's very bare bones. There's no like channels or anything in it. If you feel free to, well, actually, I don't want to see if I can do this. Okay, there we it should literally just be like something like that, like my username. So feel free to add me, and I will send you an invite to the server if you like. I'm hoping to finish setting it up this weekend. I have it like quote unquote registered or whatever. I just actually need to go through the process of like adding a couple channels, like putting some rules down and stuff like that. Yeah, feel free to add me, and I'd be happy to continue the discussion there as well. I think I don't know if you have, yeah, you've been by one of the Naruto streams, right? But regardless, I know that Auhert has been asking to get in VC at some point and chat about things, and I totally be down for that. I just have to, do the homework and get familiar with Discord a little bit more. Says the user wasn't correct. Okay, let me see real quick if I can just pull this up. So I'm seeing my profile as, if you try it with the spaces, like John Space, like hang on, let me type it out, like John the Maven. If you just like type it out like that, like my username, does that work? If not, if you feel comfortable sharing your username here, I will also I can also just like send you an invite. I think I did that for Kakazu and for Howard as well. Not the streams, but I watch most of the videos you have. Oh, cool, awesome, thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate that. The streams will all be left up on the live panel if you're interested in checking them out. Although they're obviously, like the stream, they're a little bit less focused, and we kind of do like back and forth as opposed to the more like targeted, or focus is probably the best word, approach on the videos on the main channel. But I really appreciate you checking them out. I worked for quite a bit on those. Had a lot of fun, but it's also just really reassuring knowing that like after that work, they were appreciated. You know what I mean? So, it's an intersection of two things that level up: video games and Naruto. Yeah, awesome. I'm really glad. Yeah, so I wanna. I made this channel basically just to have an excuse to talk at great length about things that I like, and I'm glad that I'm finding some people who also share those interests. In the future, I'm planning on also talking about Dark Souls 2, Avatar: The Last Airbender. I want to keep the Naruto streams going as a consistent thing on Sundays, because there's a lot of stuff that I want to talk about, and I have at least one, if not two more Naruto videos planned in the next year. The next scripted video I'm going to do, I think, is going to be... Oh, interesting. Is going to be on Avatar: The Last Airbender. I want to talk about the opening episodes, and it's essentially going to be similar to the last Elden Ring stream I did, where I'm just talking about like what an amazing job they did at like quietly and intuitively setting up the world and teaching you about like the characters and the backstory and everything without hitting you over the head with it. And so I think that'll kind of be on theme for what I've been trying to do with Elden Ring. But then I would like to do a video about Conan, and possibly a video about like power scaling in general, and how the Naruto power scaling community like how its paradigm tends to affect their interpretation of things. But yeah, I'm also open to suggestions if there's anything you want to talk about on stream, or if there's anything. I have a few videos in my head that I kind of want to address in the queue, so to speak, but I'm open to long-term suggestions as well. Basically any excuse to just continue fucking yapping about Naruto I'm gonna take. Avatar's on your watch list, so definitely look out for that. Yeah, it's so I'm not a big fan of the Netflix show, but the original like Nickelodeon cartoon is really, really, really good. And I think I just rewatched it about a month or two ago, and it holds up super well. The music is great, the character development is great, there's some great fight choreography, the magic system is really cool. So yeah, I highly recommend it. With that being said, I think I'm probably Oh, how does it feel at the bottom is mine. Okay, I'll send you an invite for sure. That being said, I think I might wrap it up for tonight. This might be a nice place to start off next time, just talking about this thing, which, as I said, is one of my favorite things in the game, and also something that disappointed me significantly. And I think it'll be a great place to kind of pick up and resume the conversation with this image. I will say, when I saw this on the initial trailers, I was just spellbound. Like, this thing is so well conceived and well drawn and haunting and chilling and just like, God. I don't know who came up with this, but well done. This is one of the best things. I love it so much. Anyway, so that being said, wish you luck in the YouTube stuff for sure. Your stuff is hella interesting. Thank you so much. I really genuinely appreciate that. Yeah, I have I don't know. It's funny. Thinking back to a few years ago, before I started working on any of this stuff, I had a very long review that I was planning on doing on like Horizon Zero Dawn and a couple other things, and I was taking the route much more of like I don't know, not a critical drinker, but like one of those kind of guys who's just like, everything sucks really bad. Let me tell you about it. I'm very upset. And like, hey, that stuff can be fun too sometimes. I guess like Cinema Sins is a good example, right? Like, I wanted to basically be like, I'm going to be the guy who points out everything wrong with everything, and that's going to be cool. And I think that marketplace is already thoroughly tapped into. And I guess I just realized that I'm not really good at just being mad at stuff. And so I thought, what if I actually talk about something I really enjoy? And that seemed to go well. So I'm going to keep trying to do that. So thank you for the encouragement and for the engagement. I really appreciate it. So that being said, thank you to anybody who stopped by, who checked out the VOD. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to continue this, I think, next Thursday. I think we've got at least a couple more streams here. I want to talk about the Weeping Peninsula, and I want to at least get us to Stormvale Castle and talk about how that level is designed in the broad strokes. Talk about Godric a little bit too. And soon in the future, within the next few weeks, I think I'll also pivot to talking about Dark Souls 2 a little bit. I've been listening to some reviews and critiques of Dark Souls 2, kind of boning up on where the discussion is at and the disagreements that people have had about the critiques of the game overall over the years. And I'd like to maybe jump in and talk about people's perspectives. I adore the game. I think it's wonderful, but also heavily flawed. So again, great opportunity for us to discuss some of the design choices that were made and why they were made, and also just to kind of reflect on how the discourse around the game has changed over the years. Finally, on Sunday, I'll be continuing the Naruto streams. Actually, this Sunday, I believe we're going to do something a little different, and we're going to talk about Dragon Ball for a little bit. A couple of people requested that I listen to a debate between two individuals whose names are escaping me. Aeroflame and was it Taurus? We're talking about Kid Buu versus Buhan, and kind of gave me a chance to go back and reread some of the old Dragon Ball chapters around the Buu saga. So not as well versed as I am in Naruto, but still, something I enjoy talking about and would be happy to hear people's thoughts on, both in terms of the debate and the chapters themselves. And so, yeah, that'll be next Thursday for more Elden Ring, this coming Sunday for some more anime-related stuff. Take care, everybody. Hope you have a good evening. Yeah, an arrow debate. It's actually pretty civil, considering the other ones that I've listened to. This one, they actually kind of get along. But yeah, I've definitely heard him, he's definitely gone on some tirades before.